What's going on, you rogues, rebels, and renegades? Welcome to episode 63 of the Rogue Country Podcast, and boy do we have a doozy for you today. Laid Back Country Picker is with us, and this is a phenomenal chat, but first, let's get down to business. Today we are brought to you by Pick Print Screen Printing. They're a Liverpool-based family-run hand screen printing company, and I love these guys. They do my t-shirts, they do the Rogue Country t-shirts, they do Josh Bettis' t-shirts. So if you need band merch, workwear, business uniforms, club or sports team wears, or apparel lines, please get in touch with them. They use eco-friendly inks. It's all done by hand, and they're just an incredible company to work with. I love them, and you should go support them. I literally picked up some brand new Rogue Country merch today from Pick Print Screen Printing, and they are phenomenal. The Rogue Country mugs are going to be going out to everyone who bought one. Thank you so much to Brian, to Jason, and to everyone else who ordered them. We've got some new t-shirts. Go over to our Rogue Country Bandcamp. You can buy them all there, and you can make sure that this podcast and us being able to support independent country music happens. We really do appreciate all the support, because every penny we raise goes straight back into putting on gigs, printing flyers, and promoting artists. So thank you so much to everyone who's been supporting us. Live music is coming to the shores of the UK, and make sure you do not miss these shows. Up first in March, starting on the 9th of March in Glasgow, John R. Miller and JP Harris joined forces to tour the shores of the UK. They started from Glasgow on the 9th, down to Newcastle on the 10th, Manchester on the 11th, Nottingham on the 12th, and London on the 14th. You do not want to miss these guys. Their albums are phenomenal. In April, on the 1st of April in Newcastle, Mike and the Moonpies are hitting the UK, and then they're on to London on the 2nd, Nottingham on the 3rd, Manchester on the 4th, and Oxford on the 5th. I am opening the Manchester show. I know Ags Connolly, friend of the podcast, an incredible songwriter, is playing the Nottingham and Oxford shows, and you do not want to miss those. We also have some incredible news that I cannot believe I get to share with you guys. I can't believe we get to actually make it happen. But Luke Hendrickson is coming to our shores. Yes, the Luke Hendrickson. I'm so excited to finally get this tour to happen. It was meant to happen in April 2020, then it was meant to happen in 2022, but we now have some actual dates. So on the 22nd of April, me and Luke are going to be playing Dark Earth Records in Wallasey at 1 p.m. for Record Store Day, and then on the same day we're going to be playing The Underground in Bradford with Chris Dover and the Hoodoo Operators. April 23rd, we're in Northwich at the Salty Dog, which is one of my favourite venues in the UK. April 24th, we're in Birkenhead at the Swinging Arm. April 25th, we're in Sheffield at the Dorothy Pax. April 26th, we're at Newark in the Flying Circus. April 28th, we're at the Whip and Kitten in Rossendale. April 30th, we're at the Dukes of Highgate in London. And we've got a couple of more shows in between those to announce, so stay tuned. And thank you so much to everyone who keeps getting to make these tours happen, who's buying tickets, because without you, we're playing to empty rooms on ourselves, which can be fun, but, it's always better to have our friends and family there, and that includes you guys, so thank you so much. But let's get down to today's episode, guys. We have a doozy of a guest, and I can't believe I got to speak to him. This was a really chance encounter. We had a message through the Rogue Country page from a guy asking if we would like to, book some shows for Laid Back Country Picker. We of course said yes, because who fucking would say no to that? So I, hopped on a call with David Laid Back himself, and we started working things out, and we get into it in the podcast, because as we were starting to organize the tour for 2024, I got a message from David that someone had reached out to him from a huge booking company. We don't name names in the episode because that's his department, but they took over all booking. So Rogue Country are not going to be booking any laid back shows, but we are definitely going to be front and center for when these happen. We get into it in the podcast, but David is such an open and lovely guy that from that Zoom call to agreeing to the podcast, we've just had, great conversations, and this was such an inspiring talk. You know him from, Tyler Childers' mentor. He's played with him at Red Rocks and opened up the Ryman gigs. Johnny Knoxville has recently touted him as their new favorite band, and we get into all of this and so much more, and this was such a lovely conversation with the Laid Back Country Picker. So without further ado, this is episode 63 of the Rogue Country Podcast with Mike West and Laid Back Country Picker. Thanks so much for making the time today.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, and obviously I've known about you for a long time, obviously, like as a fan of Tyler Childers and his music and stuff, seeing you come through, but I wanted to try and take it back to the beginning, obviously, and talk about your influences and when you started first picking up a guitar and stuff. I read that you started playing bass in local bluegrass bands first. Was that the first experience of musicianship and being in a band back then, or did you do something before that?
Yeah, well, really, it was just playing with my dad up into that point because he was a blues musician. But yeah, the really probably branching out to actually be with other people and maybe make a dollar was doing that first.
And what was the type of stuff you grew up listening to? Was it bluegrass like locally, or was it records? Or
Yeah, it was records. My dad had a pretty good old bluegrass record collection, and plus they played music almost every weekend, either at our house or someone else's house. So I was exposed to a lot of live bluegrass at an early age.
Oh, cool. And then from the bluegrass bands and stuff, it says on your like EPK that it was your first professional bar gig was when you went on a senior trip. What do you remember what that bar gig was? What was it you were playing? Like,
Oh
take us
yeah,
back to that night.
sure. Well, it really wasn't. It was the night of my high school senior trip, and all the other students went on that senior trip, and I did not. I opted out to go do my first real gig. And we were a rock band at that point, and we were playing. We had original songs written, but we knew people didn't want to hear many of them, so we slipped a few in. But we were just playing the standard '70s rock and roll at the time, and it was a place called the Question Mark Club, in Kermit, West Virginia, which was very questionable. And there were some interesting things went on that evening. I was exposed to a world I'd never really seen before.
Yeah. And what was your first band called?
That band was called Cold Ethel after the Alice Cooper song.
Oh, awesome. And was obviously on the new record, you have a track called Cooper. Was he an influence musically growing up? Because you kind of forget how long Alice Cooper's been around.
Yeah. Hey, I wasn't a huge Alice Cooper fan. I really liked a couple of his songs, but it's not like I had I guess Love It to Death. And I dug a lot of that, but that wasn't that big of an influence. It's just after I got older and I actually saw Alice here about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and he was just fantastic live, man. He was still, I mean, what a production he put. Have you seen him?
Yeah, I've seen him a couple of times.
Oh my gosh. And he played this little town here called Pikeville, and it was right when COVID was letting go. And they didn't sell many tickets because they didn't want too many people in the arena. So he's playing to a half-empty room in Pikeville, Kentucky. And you would have thought he was playing, the Carnegie Hall. I mean, he was still just balls out. It was great.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. One of the first times I think I saw him was when Motley Crue were doing their final, quote-unquote, tour. He was the opening act for them, and he did 2 dates in the UK kind of on his own. And they were small venues, and there was literally one, which is the other end of the country from me. And it was in like a leisure center. So it was just a gym hall, but the Alice Cooper production of it. And it felt so like, that's how I imagine gigs in like the 70s were, when it wasn't these huge arenas and like dedicated clubs. It was, you find a venue and you play that venue, and it had like a real earnest feel to it on top of Alice Cooper's production. It was insane. He's such a phenomenal entertainer.
Oh, he really is. And you're right. I bet it was a different kind of feel back in the day for stuff like that. And I bet it was wonderful.
Yeah. And then growing up, so the records and stuff you listen to, who made you want to play guitar? Because you've got a really cool, like, swampy sound with the slide and stuff on your latest records and stuff. Was that something you picked up early on, or who were your guitar heroes back in the day?
No, not early on. I mean, I was, mom and dad were real traditionalists, and even if they were listening to anything besides bluegrass, it was Johnny Cash records. So I really liked Luther Perkins and that kind of playing.
Yeah.
And, Luther just played so melodically and just kind of followed the vocal line Johnny did. That's what Luther did. And, when you're first learning to play, you're not very skilled, and that lends itself to how you play. So I adapted and really started playing like that a lot. But then as I got better, you move into extended solos and going off and just playing tons of notes. And I go through a period where you want to play as many notes as you can. I saw Randy Rhoads before he died.
Really?
Oh, yeah. That was pretty much probably about a month and a half before he died. I saw him, and it was it made me wonder why I even play guitar because he was just so
Yeah.
good. But when I get into the slide playing, I'd really started following a band, the Georgia Satellites.
Mm.
And, their guitar player, Rick Richards, is just a phenomenal player. And he's just his slide playing is really good. And it's that, I hear all these slide players now and people like, what's his name? The Allman Brothers guy,
Mm.
uh,
Dwayne
Truck.
is a
Yeah, Derek
yeah.
Trucks
Yeah.
and all those guys. And they're just so precise, and Sonny Landreth, and their notes are just dead on. And I can't believe how well they play. And I don't play like that at all. Now, I'm a Johnny Winter kind of slide player because a lot of my stuff's off pitch a little, but it hopefully feels good. Jimmy Page, the way he plays slide, he's not one of those perfectionists, and that's how and Rick Richards plays that way. And those are my slide heroes, Rick and Johnny and Rick Page.
Yeah. No, awesome. And just going back to Randy Rhoads, because I've never spoke to anyone who got to see him live. That must have been the Diary of a Madman tour, like 82, 83.
Yeah, it was probably early 82. It was about February, and I think he passed away a little bit or in the early spring. And, at that point, he had Tommy Aldridge and Rudy in the band. And I had fairly good seats. We were probably about 20 rows back. And it was just a mind blower, man. I mean, I'd love the Blizzard album, and I guess I'd heard Diary at that point, but to see him do it live, and I mean, Randy was just so good. And it was a mind blower.
I can't imagine. Ozzy's just cancelled all his UK dates and European dates, and he's retired from touring. And we've held on to our tickets for 5 years. We bought them in 2018, and we just didn't want to give up on the hope of maybe getting to see him one last time. But I've got the tribute album. I've listened to it a fucking million times. I've learned to play Mr. Crowley, and when I was in uni, I did all the tapping solos and shit for Randy. But to see him live must have been an experience.
It was. It changed how I thought about guitar. And I just realized that physically, what a gift he had just to be able to physically do what he could do. And I can't. My body doesn't do those things. But then on top of that, the way he thought and the way he thought about his phrasing and the note choice he had, no one had really played like that, at least to my knowledge up to that point. And it for me, I mean, Eddie Van Halen changes the way people play guitar, but then Randy changes it too, I think. And there's a lot of people in between that came and went. And for me, those two guitar players just had a major impact on how rock and roll was played in the late 70s, early 80s.
No, so like for me, I always think like electric rock guitar, it goes off in like kind of two branches, and it's like Iommi and Page. And then I feel like the next two that you kind of branched off was either Randy or Eddie. And I always feel like it's those four that kind of shaped like the next 2 decades of guitar.
Man, that's a really good way to think about it, because I hadn't thought about the Iommi Page split, but you're right. And I love both those guys too. And, Page with the more blues thing, and Iommi found those dark chords and notes to play. You're right. That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, but with kind of your influences, obviously, like live, I've seen you wear your Motorhead shirts and things. So it's combining like Motorhead, Stanley Brothers, Jennings, Randy Rhoads. Was it, I guess, you didn't really think about the sound you were trying to make initially? It was just, that's what came naturally to you with those influences swirling about.
Yeah, and when you say it that way, it sounds insane, doesn't it? To think about all the different people in there. I'm an old guy. I've been around a long time, and I've got to see the influence of Waylon and the way they play guitar. And that's Waylon playing most of that good stuff. And there's just a purity to it, and I mean that's Waylon's personality when he plays guitar, and it was Randy's personality when he played, and I just so appreciate that. And the longer you play, hopefully you kind of take all that stuff and turn it into your way of playing. Because for the longest time, when you're young, you want to play like somebody else, but that starts to slip away at some point, and you just become who you are, and that's a beautiful thing.
And in terms of like lyrically, was there anyone influencing you around like how you approach the lyrics and your sensibilities in that way outside of those guys?
There's a couple of little bands. Well, first, it goes back to the Georgia Satellites a lot, because Dan Baird, they wrote a lot about the South and just the kind of I don't know, there's a subculture of the way people live in the area where I'm at. And I really picked up on a lot of what Dan was doing. And he was just telling stories about just everyday common people. And I think I tried to do that. Are you familiar with Webb Wilder?
No.
He was a guy. He's also from, I think, Mississippi, but he kind of made a name for himself as a rockabilly guy around Nashville. And he's done fairly. He had a couple of records that actually got on MTV a little bit. And Webb has a great sense of humor. I mean, he's always writing just very irrelevant stuff, but he's a great musician and always had a good band. And there's another band here called Southern Culture on the Skids. Don't know if you're familiar with them. And there too, they're more surf based, but they also just have a great sense of humor, and they're all great musicians. And I tend to write some things that are a little bit goofy sometimes, but I try to play with people that play well. And so it's one thing to be goofy, but if you have good players with you and you're playing good music, that makes it a little more credible, I think.
Oh, I think it's the same thing if you go back to Alice Cooper, where there's almost a shtick to it or a lightness, but Absolutely. It's done with such a personality and sincerity that it's never seen as a parody of itself. It's never seen as something disparaging in any way. It's like people can acknowledge the wit of it, but it's not detracting it, which I think is a really fine line to walk.
You're right. It is. And it's funny. I was watching an Alice Cooper interview this morning, and he was talking about when Glenn Campbell died. And I didn't realize he and Glenn Campbell were like best friends, and they played off together all the time. And Alice talks about Alice Cooper in, third person, like that's the Alice Cooper thing. And it's really interesting to see how he separates that out.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting thing. But going back to kind of your early days and stuff, it said that you performed with like lots of artists, like in an uncredited way. Was that in the studios and stuff?
Now, like talking about like the Georgia Satellites and the Kentucky Headhunters and those people, is that who you're talking about?
So it says in your kind of EPK, it's like you went on to perform and record with many well-known artists, often uncredited, as is the Nashville way.
Yeah, well, you can't believe everything you read on a website. But I did actually with the Kentucky Headhunters. Are you familiar with those guys? Yeah. So I really admired them. And I keep going back to those two bands, the Satellites and the Headhunters, but they had such a big impact on me when they first came out and they got popular because they were people from rural America. They were Southerners. They still had an accent, but they were playing. I mean, the Headhunters worshiped Led Zeppelin, and that's what really they wanted to sound like. And the Satellites really worshiped the Faces, and they kind of wanted to sound like the Faces all the time. It just showed me you can play big guitar rock and still have a little bit of a twang in your voice, and there's a place for you. So we decided when we were going to record, I had a band at that time called Night Train, and really just wanted to sound like the Satellites. That's what we were doing. But the Kentucky Headhunters, where they record, it's probably about 200 miles from where I live. So we went down to the studio they used to record, and the engineer kind of dug what we were doing and played some of our stuff for the Headhunters. So they befriended us, and we went back down and actually recorded some with them helping out.
Oh, awesome.
So I did get to record some with some of the guys from the Headhunters. And I wound up on a record that one of the Georgia Satellite guys also played on. We were never in the same room at the same time, but we were both playing on it. But I actually became really close friends with both of those bands, and I've been out with them on little stints on the road and stuff. Opened up for both of them a whole lot, and those guys really had a big impact on me.
That's so cool. Was there anything specifically you kind of took away from them in terms of when you're in the studio with them, or?
I don't do well in the studio. I watch people who can play, and it's almost seems like effortless, and they nail everything first take. And I really struggle in the studio. I don't know. I always feel like I'm going to mess up, so I hold back when I play there. And I always read that Mick Rouse from Bad Company, it was the same thing. Like he played really safe in the studio, but then live he would go for things, and I think I struggle with it. This last record I put out probably has my best studio playing that I've ever done on it, and it wasn't all first takes. There was quite a bit of work went into it. But one thing you really learn, or at least you should be as professional as possible and have your licks together and know what you're going to do ahead of time. Because I watched those guys play. I went down. I was there for the recording of Tyler's second record in Nashville. What's the second album?
Country Squire.
Yeah, Country Squire. I was in the room when they recorded it, and it was a lot of Nashville players. And oh my God, I mean, it's one. Here's really how it went down. Maybe Tyler would gather around the players, and they would say, "Play the song." So Tyler takes an acoustic. He plays the song. All those guys are writing charts as he plays. I mean, it's in real time. And they say, okay. And they walk into the recording studio, and first, second take every time. It's just unbelievable how they could
Mm.
be creative and come up with those parts on the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
And I watched that and went, I can't do that. I'm not at that level, and few people are. So I kind of learned my place from going and doing that. But it was incredible to watch that.
Yeah. No, I think like reading up on, Owen Bradley's session players and the ones who kind of defined the Nashville sound back in the day, and you hear about the players now of, that caliber. And, as a musician, you think you can play, you can, write songs, hold your own, but they have just this whole other level of like creativity and perspective. And I don't know if it's because it's not their song necessarily, so they've got an outside view of it, but they can just bring something to it in a way that not many people, even the original artists, could not think to do in that terms.
No, you're absolutely right. And I had this stereotype in my head that Nashville players or just studio players are very sterile, and they're going to bring a sterile part in, and it's not going to be creative. And what I watched down there, that wasn't the case at all. And the more that made me want to learn more about these studio guys. And I guess that's why they're like first call people, because not only are they just so adequate on their instrument and they can nail it first time, they also bring a creative element to it. I was watching those guys create those parts that we hear on Tyler's album in real time, and they didn't sit there for a half hour and figure it out. It just came to them, and I don't know how you do that.
Yeah,
They're
no,
next level.
that's just years and years of practice and something else. No, it's such a fascinating thing. I really respect and I'm curious about those guys because it feels like they're musicians in a way that they're like kind of almost absent of ego because it's never about them or having their names necessarily on something. It's about serving the song in the best way possible. And there's so many unsung Nashville musicians who have played on so many phenomenal records that will never get the credit that that song may have achieved. But without them, that song would never have achieved that. Anyway, it's a really weird duality in world that they exist in.
It is. The guy that was playing, I guess he's been on both the Tyler's Nashville records, was Russ Paul, and he played guitar and played a lot of pedal steel on it. So I recorded Kingsport in that same studio where Tyler recorded, and I got Russ Paul to play on my record. And man, there wasn't a whole lot for me to do. He was just so good. And I wound up playing a few parts. And also during the recording of that record, like 2 weeks before we did it, I was cutting an apple open and I sliced my thumb open. I mean, like a really bad cut. And I couldn't play very well at all. That limited what I could do. So I was going to lean more on Russ anyway. But then after you get down there, you go, geez, I don't really need to put one on because they were so good. But you're right. It's incredible what they do. A lot of them probably do not get credit. And you go back and look at Russ Paul's, he's been on tons of people's records in Nashville. And it's not like you hear him and go, oh, that's Russ Paul, because he played for the song and exactly what it required. And they're just so good at that.
No, it's insane. And no, speaking of Tyler stuff, when did you first meet Tyler? What was like that instance?
Well, in my daytime life, I'm a social studies teacher at a high school in Louisa, Kentucky. And Tyler was one of my students. He just came in as a freshman student in my government class. I'd known his parents. We were about the same age. And when you grow up in a small community, everyone knows everyone. But here comes Tyler, and he's always carrying a guitar every day. And that was my introduction to him.
And now you're signed onto his like Hickman Holler label. You've played a load of gigs with him, like the Ryman and Red Rocks. What was Red Rocks like? Because that venue's so legendary, and I've seen photos and videos of it. It's on my bucket list to visit one day and maybe one day play.
Well, you really must do that. For me, I really loved U2 when they hit, and that whole live at Red Rocks thing. I mean, we watched that all the time, and it just seemed otherworldly then because it's all misty, and it's cold the day they did that show, and you just get such a cool vibe from watching what's going on. So when I get to play there, I'm just in awe. One, that I'm standing there in the same place of this venue that I've watched all my life. But even if you're there, not even for a show, it's just one of the most impressive places I've ever been. Those gigantic rocks, and it's just beautiful there. When we did the show, I was playing with Luna, with my wife, who has Luna and the Mountain Jets, and we opened for Power there. And I've tried to explain it to people, but it was really sort of an out of body thing. And I swear, I felt like I was just floating above myself, watching myself play the show. It really didn't feel like I was actually playing. and we happened to have a pretty good show, and most of the notes were right, and that's just pretty incredible. But it's I can't explain to you what it's like to be there and to play there.
That's so cool. And obviously you play the rhyme and stuff. With the label being on, or with your record being on his label, was there a discussion with him about kind of, did you pitch, like, did you have the album kind of ready to go and just be like, this is what it is, or?
No, not at all. The first record, we just kind of made it up on the spot because we needed an album real quick, because we'd invented this character, this image of laid back that people seemed to buy into. So we thought, well, we better have a record real quick. But then when I get with Tyler and get on Hickman Holler, he just said, we're going to record you in Nashville on this date. And it was probably 8-9 months down the road. And so he's like, get some stuff together. But it's not like he checked in on me. It's like, what do you got? Have you got stuff ready? Tyler didn't care. He just wanted me to go to Nashville and record. So he let me pick my people. He's like, you can have anybody you want. We'll get you whoever. So, I loved watching what Russ Paul had done. So I got him. But then I used the drummer that I always play with from here in Kentucky. And his name Peyton Miles, because I don't know anyone any better, really. So Hayden played on it. I got Jesse Wells from Tyler's band to play fiddle on it and mandolin and stuff, because, he's great. The bass player I got is JT Cure, who is also from this area. And I'd actually played some with JT in other bands, but JT is Chris Stapleton's bass player now. So we just had all these brilliant musicians, and we show up, and we kind of did the same thing I'd watched Tyler do. They said, take an acoustic, show us how it goes. And I would do it. They would chart it. We'd walk in and 2 takes later, the song's finished. And Tyler came by. He actually sings on one of the songs on Kingsport, and he hung out a little bit, but he wasn't too concerned with what I was doing. I don't think he cared.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
He did it in a good way. It's whatever you come up with is going to be fine.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. And with kind of having that 9 months, did you have any songs you had been working on then, or did you kind of create from then until recording time?
Where I teach school, and really that's pretty consuming. And when your school year starts, you lose a lot of time to work on music. Plus, we were playing live a lot. So my weekends were mostly tied up with us going off and doing gigs. So, little by little, the songs trickle in. And honestly, I tried not to write with anything in mind. It's like I'm just writing, and we'll do it when we get there. But maybe about 2 or 3 months out, I'm going, I don't have many songs. I really need to knuckle down and make sure I've got enough. So I probably wrote a couple there just so I would have enough tunes to go in and record. But, writing's a weird thing, as you know, and sometimes it comes quickly, and other times you hit a dry spell and not a lot's going on.
No, awesome. Like this Go West record, I really, really enjoyed. Kind of getting into, just as you use Cooper as an example, what was the writing process behind that? Do you remember much of how that came about? Was it riff first or hook first, or?
Yeah, in the Nashville thing, was another thing I learned down there in the studio is they really trim the fat out of songs in Nashville. Like I would play my songs for me, and the producer, it was Dave Ferguson, who was just a legendary producer. And he's like, well, why are you doing this? Why are you repeating this twice? Why do you have this little mini bridge here? What's the purpose of it? And they would just slash all that out. So you got a 3-minute song with no wasted space. And it's amazing to watch them do that. And I really thought it's a whole other craft to itself. But I also went, this next record is not going to be that way. I watched a friend of mine play, and he was playing live. His name's Sean Whiting, who's just brilliant, by the way. And their songs, they were just like a room for a jam, and there was an solo happen. And that really had an impact on me that day. I thought, all songs do not need to be 2.5-minute songs with there's room for guitar playing. And I really set out to make this just a good 70s rock and roll guitar album. And records I love is Rocks by Aerosmith, I think is such an important album. Powerage by AC/DC. I mean, that period right there of just rock guitar albums, I think are brilliant. And I kind of wanted to make it a rock and roll guitar record. And if guitar solos lasted 1.5 minutes, that's okay.
Yeah, no, totally. And going back, you play with your wife, Luna. And going back, how did you guys meet?
We met in high school.
Oh, yeah.
We were in school together, so it'd probably been late 70s. I was a year ahead of her in school. and we just we had a class or two together. I knew her family, I knew her sister, and we just kind of hooked up that way, and we liked it. It turns out she was a big Tom Petty fan, and I was a Tom Petty fan, and that was a kind of a nice thing. It drew us together, and we've been together ever since, really.
Oh, awesome. How long have you guys been married?
38 years.
Nice. That's
no,
awesome.
Give me a signal. Is that right? 39? 40?
Yep.
Well, 39 years.
That's awesome. And obviously getting to play live together must just be, again, it's one of those things you get to share with each other and, look over and have that kind of relationship. That just must strengthen it even more. It must be awesome.
No, it's the greatest thing. We get to travel together, and we play music together. We do a lot of stuff instinctively now where we don't even have to say it. And on stage, I can read where she's going and what she's doing, and things just flow well. And that's from me playing with her in her band with Luna. And now with the thing we've been doing with Layback, where we played two piece in the last probably year and a half or something like that. The drums was a new instrument for her, and she really only first started playing drums a little bit during COVID because we had nothing else to do, and I had a drum set downstairs, and she really adapted to it pretty quick. So we're still kind of feeling each other out on where we can go with the two piece and what works and what doesn't. But it's a great joy to play music with her.
Yeah. No, awesome. And with Laidback, where did the concept come to have this kind of look and persona and sound come from? Where did that originate from?
It really came from playing music in bars in the 80s, and there was people who looked that way. And at first you kind of go, you guys are kind of cornball, and why are you still dressing that way? That decade's over. But as I got a little older and a little more mature, I really appreciated those guys for what they were doing, because they were staying true to themselves. And even though maybe their style of dressing had come and gone, that's who they were.
Yeah.
And they were proud of it, and they just went out and gave it their all, just weekend warriors. And so when I started thinking about, we'd just taken a photograph of me wearing a goofy cowboy hat with those green glasses on. And when we saw the shot, we thought that's an interesting picture, and that looks like somebody we would call the laid back country picker after the Waylon Jennings song. And it just sort of developed from there. And I mean, the laid back photograph is at least 10 years old. And I've been talking about a character called Laid Back Country Picker for a long time. So it's been a long time in development. But as far as actually having a product out and playing music under that name, I guess I've been doing that for 5 years now, I think.
Cool. And was there a kind of a genesis as to like when you wanted to bring music out? You've been having this kind of idea gestate for 5 years, and then was there a turning point? When did you come on the sound and was like, that's the sound for that? Or was it you wanted to go out and then you kind of, well, what would it sound like if we did?
Well, when we put the image on a shirt, and people started buying it because Tyler wore the shirt. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is a really popular thing right now. So let's make a record of it. And, since it's called Laid Back Country Picker, which has a Waylon connection, we made it more of a country sounding record. And like I played my guitar, and I wanted to use a phase 90 on everything. And let's just have phase through everything. So probably the first year or so, people play shows live, and it's more that outlaw country kind of sound. And there were shows where, honestly, I turned the phase 90 on at the beginning of the night, and I didn't turn it off. I let it run all swirl. But as it more developed, I'm a rock and roller too, and I love 70s rock, and I just want to be Jimmy Page like we all do. And I think it started to show itself more and more as Layback went on, and now it becomes this thing like, one of my taglines is I'm playing good country music and I'm treating people right. And if you go see me now, there's not a whole lot of country music to it. It's more of a 70s rock band feel. But and I guess I'm still developing it and going, I don't know where it'll go. And that's the beautiful thing about it. I don't have to know where I'm going. No. I can play whatever I want. I can make whatever I want. I've got a lot of freedom to do what I want to musically.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, a lot of 70s rock, there is an overlap with that kind of outlaw Waylon Jennings sound. There is definitely a Venn diagram to be had of those type of guitars, those type of attitude, and that type of playing, where it is almost not interchangeable, but you could see one fading into the other and back again. It is a spectrum of a sound.
Oh, you're right. There is a record that came out probably about late '70s. It's just called Waylon Live.
Mm.
And I don't know if you've ever heard it or
Is
not.
that the Texas one?
Yeah,
Or
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it is.
I've listened to the Waylon Live record. I think it's on Spotify. It's one of the
When
live
they
albums I've heard from him.
when they put it out, it was just a single album, and then they re-released it and they made it a double album, and
Yeah.
they just had a lot of stuff on. But I just had the single album, and I just remember listening to that, and I can't even describe it. You did a good job trying to explain how it's set up like a rock and roll concert in a way. Like you got a guitar here, and then you got a pedal guitar here, and the way they interact with each other, and the way the drums and bass have their little section. It's real rock and roll, but it's still outlaw country and it's
Yeah.
Waylon. But
Yeah.
there's a clear similarity there to how Aerosmith operated live with Brad and Joe on left and right side and just the rhythm section holding it down. They were super similar to me. And that's why I don't have a lot of problem uh, playing the way I play, or, like I play Godzilla by Blue Oyster Cult, but I play with a Waylon beat. And it's not like I'm really honestly doing it to be cute. It just works and it
Yeah.
feels pure and natural to me. And that's how I play it.
Yeah, and I think, I think the rock crowd is a lot more embracing of country elements than the country crowd is embracing of like rock elements. And I think it works really well. Like you have, Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, in rock circles, they're still considered legends. You don't have to go very far in a rock bar to find someone who loves those type of guys, because there is such an overlap and a respect for those type of artists.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys are guys that went against the grain,
Yeah.
and they did what they felt, and that their music didn't get altered or watered down by Nashville or whoever was doing that. And I think that does stand up, and a lot of people do really appreciate that, and from the rock and roll side as well.
Mm. Yeah, no, I just thought that I'd have loved to have seen a double headline tour of Waylon Jennings and Motorhead, because I really think those two crowds would have got on fucking perfectly.
You're absolutely, and you're right. That makes the hair on my arm stand up just to think about that. That would have been phenomenal, because you got two guys that just said, "This is what I do,
Yeah,
and I'm going to do it until I don't breathe anymore." And that's exactly what both those guys did, and they didn't care if Wales didn't like it or whatever. They were who they were. Man, what a good tour that would have been.
I know. I'm just thinking about it then, and it would never have happened. Or, if I could go back in time and change one thing, I would have tried to make that happen.
Well, if you go back in time, let me know. I want to get tickets to that show.
So obviously, being from Kentucky and being involved in the Kentucky scene lately, it kind of seems like Childers was the new wave of Kentucky artists, and there's been like so many great artists that have kind of come after him, with like Lance Rogers and James Reed and stuff. With your perspective of seeing the Kentucky scene from, a few decades, what's been your perspective of how it's grown and shifted?
I'm trying to go back and think about, there really wasn't that much of a cohesive scene in Kentucky before that. You had a lot of artists that came out. The Ricky Skaggs and Larry Cordell came out. Exile came from Kentucky. The Headhunters came from Kentucky. The Judds, but they're all kind of, and Dwight Yoakam, but
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were all sort of in the same boat together.
Yeah.
But then after Tyler did what he did, you just saw a rash of people who said singer-songwriters, and I'm going to sing about Appalachia, and I'm going to stand there with my guitar and take a stand. And you just saw a groundswell of people do that. And some people honestly just come out sounding exactly like Tyler, and that's just going to happen. If you look, it's easy to look at the Seattle scene when it exploded, and all of a sudden everyone sounded like that coming out of Seattle, and that's how you got a record deal. And I'm not going to say that a lot of people said, well, I want to sound just like Tyler, but he had a big influence on him, and a lot of them do wind up sounding that way. But then you mentioned somebody like Lance, who really doesn't, and Lance just he's Lance, and that comes through. And there's so many people. There's Cole Chaney, and I hate starting naming names because we leave people out. But there's a lot of people who just saw it's okay to sing about this area. I can take an acoustic and go deliver the word, and people are paying attention to it right now. So I'd never seen anything like that really happen. And to be in the area, you always read about how those scenes developed in other places. And I'm sure there's the Detroit scene or the Muscle Shoals scene or the LP metal scene. And I got to watch it happen right here.
And, obviously you talked about Lance and Cole Chaney and stuff. I'm happy to name some more names if you've if there's anyone on your mind that kind of has been coming out new that people should check out, this is the place to kind of do it.
Gosh, I'm so forgetful. Wish you can help me. I mean, there's a kid here named Logan Halstead who is just great. Man, it blows my mind. These people. That's so cool. In the hard rock genre, don't look up Sean Whiting if you're not familiar with him. He's just a super, super talented player. There's a band here which is, they kind of predate Tyler, called Sunday Best. Are you familiar with them at all? No. They got kind of big on their own. The primaries, well, there's two of them. They're a two-piece band. It's Christopher Bentley and Nick Jamerson. And look them up, and they've been doing stuff and writing about Appalachia and singing about it for quite a while too. New people, well, one of my favorite bands is Wayne Graham. Are you familiar with them at all?
Yeah.
So, Wayne Graham is why I recorded my record in their studio, and Kenny and Hayden, the two primaries, and Wayne Graham have been on all my records.
Oh, awesome.
So they're great. I kind of like Luna and the Mountain Jets. If you want to check them out, they're pretty.
Yeah, but
what's some band? Throw some people at me because I'm probably leaving off people I know.
James Reed, Katie Meadows.
I don't know James Reed. I'm not familiar with him at all.
Yeah, he's a good one. He brought out a record, I think it was last year or the year before. We had him on here, and it was interesting. We talked about the Kentucky scene with him, and there was a lot of people, he said, that when Tyler came out, a lot of people kind of did the opposite. There was a groundswell of people who picked up guitars because of it, but then there was a lot of people who put guitars down because of it, because they didn't think they could match kind of what he came out the gate doing. And we kind of, if you're gonna have that attitude, you should have given up guitar and songwriting when John Prine came out, or Chris Christopherson or something. It's like there's like, I know there's always going to be someone better than me. It's like, I know Randy Rhoads existed. I know John 5 exists for guitar playing and stuff. I know Towns and Prine exists for songwriters, but it's not about doing it the best. It's doing it the most honest.
And it took me a long time to learn that, because being a guitar player, like I said, when I saw Randy play, I thought, why am I doing it? But you do figure it out that it's not a contest, and it's about expressing yourself. And you're right. John Prine would have closed the door on all of us. Yeah. But, everyone's still got something to say in our own way, and that's fine. And I love what you said. You just be true to yourself and learn how to be the best you can be. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And I think even, because I see on the internet where people are talking about how, there's so many clones pop up of like an artist once an artist kind of breaks. But I remember, I'm from England, and the open mic scene completely changed after Ed Sheeran came on the scene. And, everybody and their dog was bringing a loop pedal to open mics. And it's just one of those things where it's people see someone do something well, and they're like, they want to experiment with it. They want to try and find their own voice. So they may not get there, but it's worth a fucking punt.
It is. And it's people who normally would never have gotten to do that. All of a sudden they were inspired to do so, and they tried. And that's if they got some joy out of it, then everybody wins on that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And obviously you're actively gigging outside of your day job and stuff. Are you playing mostly around Kentucky? Do you go further afield? Because like America's so big, I can't imagine how far you have to drive to kind of get out of states and into new areas.
It really is big, and you can drive for 4 or 5 days, and you still got a ways to go. Originally, we were playing probably a lot within a 150-mile radius. But, Layback's kind of blown up just a little bit here lately, and that circle's starting to get a little bit big. We were going to Indianapolis, which I know means nothing to you, but it's like now it's a 4 or 5 hour drive to get to some of these gigs. And more people are starting to show up at the gigs too. And phenomena I've seen in the last couple of weeks are people come up at our show and say, I drove 5 hours to see you. And, that's never happened before. But we got people traveling great distances now to come and see what we do. And it's kind of a mind blower for me. It's like, really? You did that? But, going back in time, I did that all the time. I would drive 4 and 5 hours to go see people that I was into. And they were underground people, and you were seeing them in a little club. And your chance of getting to go talk to them after the show was pretty much 99%. And there's something really cool about that. And that seems to be happening right now.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And obviously, you kind of had a big jump before you even put music out of just Tyler wearing a laid back shirt. Most recently, you've had Johnny Knoxville say you're his new favorite band. How much did that kind of move the needle or jump things up in the last couple of...
The Johnny Knoxville thing had a big impact. And it couldn't have happened really at a better time because the album maybe was just getting ready to come out. And I'd never put anything up digitally before. I'd refused to use Spotify or iTunes or anything, but I put it all out there with this one. And the reach, just internationally was quite surprising. And within the last week, a guy named DJ Ringo on Virgin Radio in Italy has done the same thing that Johnny Knoxville did. Like he said, this guy's cool, and he shared one of our little Instagram videos. And now my traffic from Italy is just unbelievable. I have so many people who like me now that I cannot pronounce their name. It's just
awesome.
But I think we had talked earlier because you and I met because we have a common, well, I don't even think he's a common friend. You didn't know Phil, did you?
No, he reached out just because of Rogue Country and things. And I'm so glad he did, because he messaged me and was like, do you know Laid Back Country Picker? And I was like, a fucking course. Like, what's up?
Yeah, I got to tell you a story about Phil before we even go any farther. The Georgia Satellites were going to tour Europe, and they were going to come play England some dates. And so I wanted to go open for them because I know these guys, and they're like, well, we can't help you, but you can contact the clubs and try to book it. So I did. I did the legwork, and I called every club they were playing at and said, look, we're from America. We'd like to open for them, and we'll bring ourselves over. So they're like, great, let's do that. So then the Satellites, something goes wrong, and they cancel the tour. But, we pretty much already bought plane tickets. And like, well, we're going anyway. And so we kept the dates. And there was a Georgia Satellites group I belonged to, and a guy named Phil Lay was in there. And he was like, hey, I know you're coming over. If you need some equipment, you can use my equipment and you can come and stay at our house. We're not going to be there. We're going to be in France, but here's what the key is. And the dude doesn't know me from Adam. I had never met him. And he gave me pretty much an old orange amplifier to tour with and a bass amp. We used his home in Bristol as a home base. And just the amount of trust he gave us was just Phil and his wife, Lindy, they've become some of our best friends. Yeah. They've come over here to our house and we go to their house, and it's unbelievable how sweet they are. Mm-hmm. So with Phil helping out with that first tour we did in England, when he reached out to you and you guys connected, it was just wonderful. So you were putting some dates together for us for 2004.
Yeah. And
now we've kind of latched on with this guy. He runs a talent. Well, he works for a talent agency in LA, which I can't name yet.
No.
And he's going to book us in some pretty big places. And so it looks like Europe at 24 is going to be a pretty exciting thing.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. Because I know we had a kind of talk before this about, the trepidation of, you've been independent, you've worked with people at like a grassroots level. To get this next step is an incredible thing. And I think, there is sometimes trepidation when you want to move to that level, but you don't want to distance yourself from the kind of grassroots connections that you've built. And it can be a worrying thing for an artist, but, it's such a fucking phenomenal opportunity for you guys.
It is, but now there was a lot of guilt that came with it because, I'm 58 and every step I've taken musically has been grassroots stuff. And it's people like you who've helped me out in Road Country. And there's just a giant list of people and promoters who maybe couldn't pay you a lot of money at their events, but they were quality events and they were sweet people. And I've known them for years now. And I've got a handful of people where if they ask me to come play somewhere, I don't even ask what it pays. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm going to go because I love this person. And just to be mired in that environment for your whole musical career, and then all of a sudden this gets dangled in front of you, it's next level. It's hard to take that step. And I still wonder if it's the right thing to do, but I'm going to do it though.
Yeah. I feel like it would be a disservice to you and your music to not see where that road goes because, obviously being a musician, you want to do it to meet people, connect, but you do want to play those bigger shows. You do want to reach those wider peoples. And if someone's there kind of saying this road might get you through that, you'd be, naive to not at least see where it goes for a while.
Yeah, I like this agency. I gave them a list of dates this summer that I have open, and I looked back at a spreadsheet here about 2 days ago, and they filled like 16 straight dates in all across the United States, and they are in venues that I couldn't get in on my own. Several of them I contacted on my own, and they're like, "No, we're not interested." All of a sudden, they are interested now, and I can't do that on my own, so I kind of have to do this, and I'm happy about it, but I still feel a little bit of guilt.
Yeah, I think it is a weird one because as a musician in the UK, there are doors that do not open to me as a musician. When I'm asking to play places, it's just, pass. It is what it is because you don't know those people. And I found from the booker side of things, those doors are slowly starting to open more. And it's always, it's disheartening in a way because it is who you know to a point. But, that's the nature of the beast. And you have to be able to work smart to position yourself to where you do get to know those people in a genuine way, because it is an industry, it is a business. And, you want to be profitable to some people, which sounds gross. It's from like a grassroots level and stuff, and it does kind of give you mixed feelings, but it is the way to reach more people. Really, it's it is what it is.
And I'm sure you and I, either one, got in this business as a business. We're musicians, and that's what we do, and that's where our heart is. But at some point, you got to realize it is a business, and in order to continue to be able to put your art out, you got to do some business stuff. And I hate it. I feel guilty when I sell people a T-shirt. Yeah. I just want to give them a T-shirt because I don't want to take their money.
Yeah.
You can't be that way, and you have to let business. And people they want to buy your stuff. They want to support you, and it's weird to get used to that. But then when you talk about booking shows, and now, this guy was telling me I need to get my fly-in rider together. And I said, what's a fly-in rider? It's like, well, when you fly into gigs and you need someone who's going to come and pick you up at the airport, and you got to have your backline lined out, and you have to have all this and that. That stuff way over my head. Yeah. I'd consider that stuff goes on. So now it's a whole new learning curve for me to figure this out.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And I'm really, no matter what happens, I'm just excited that, 2024, you come over to the UK because, I really can't wait to see you guys live, because from everything I've seen and everything I've heard, it is just a fucking killer live show. And I really can't wait for you guys to come over.
Well, Mike, thank you. You're so nice to say that. And we can't wait to come over there, because when we played England a long time ago, the music fans there are just so phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And what you do with Road Country is just so awesome, man. And
thank you.
You're filling a void that needs to be filled. And let's hope you continue to rise and everything continues to go up for you too. If I can, I'll drag you up with me.
Oh, that would be awesome. When was the last time you played like the UK in Europe?
I was afraid you was going to ask me that. Is Teresa 03 or 04?
Last time?
Yeah. It was somewhere. I went over once just with Night Train, and I'm going to guess that was 04. And then we went back again with a guy named Rob McNerlin, who I was playing with. And we played with Rob and Luna, and that was probably 05, maybe, somewhere in that ballpark. But I mean, we were playing little places. But I was there enough. One thing that struck me about England was, we talk about how big America is. Well, it seemed like in England, one day's drive, you can be from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And we really had a great time up in Newcastle. We played up there, and that was just wonderful. We played London, played Bristol. We bounced around quite a bit around the country, and it was just great. We were just playing little pubs. People were really into it. Trying to think of some of I can't remember the other places we played, but it's been a little while. And I haven't been off outside the UK. So I'm really excited to get over on the mainland and see what's going on.
Oh, awesome. That is one of the good things about the UK is I think you can pretty much do the entire from like the south to the tip of Scotland in less than a day. If you just hammer it. I remember I drove from mine, which is the north of England, to Aberdeen, which is quite high up in Scotland. It took maybe 6 hours, which.
Yeah. Is that which M is that M1 or M4? What goes up?
I have no idea. It might be the M4, but I just follow the sat nav now. Like that's the thing. I'd have hated to have tried to do this thing without Google Maps.
Man, I think we did it, and we rented a van when we landed it in Heathrow, and they just threw me the keys. Like, have this van back in 24 days. I'd never driven in England. I didn't know where I was going. It took a little while to get used to all that. And we were really doing it all by the seat of our pants. But by the time it was over with, we had quite the experience.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, we'll wrap this up, but I'm just so but before we do go, talking about kind of putting your music on Spotify, because Go West is on Spotify and streaming services now. What was the apprehension behind putting it on digital? Was it just obviously Spotify doesn't pay anyone anything and stuff? Was it that kind of issue that you had with streaming services?
Yeah, initially that's the problem because I'm thinking, it's just kind of logic. Why would I give away
Yeah.
what people are paying for? And I was really, and it kind of fits with the whole laid back image too, that, if you want to buy it, I'm selling it out of
Yeah.
the trunk of the car, and that's the only way you're going to get it. But then as I got a website and people from across the country, I got on XM radio a little bit and people were ordering it from across the country, and that's fine. And I remember when I was putting out Kingsport, Tyler's manager said, "Are you going to put this up digital?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Well, if you just want to turn down a revenue stream, that's up to you." And that phrase really resonated with me. But what really made it all okay with me is Spotify. To me, I think about it as radio now. That's all Spotify is. It's a way to get your music out for other people to hear it. And people who are really fans who want to support you will contact you and purchase your music. And that seems to be happening.
Yeah.
But the connections I've made and just across Europe right now, Australia, doesn't happen without Spotify.
No.
And it's a necessary evil. And I haven't been online long enough to see how sales are because Apple reports out really slowly. But I guess I've moved quite a few units on iTunes. I don't know. But it's a weird step for me, but it certainly seems to have paid off.
Yeah. No, totally. I think that's the right kind of outlet to look at it. It's a revenue stream in the vaguest sense because it's 0.002 cents or whatever it is, but it is promotion. I view it purely as marketing promotion, to be like, you can listen to it here, but if you want to actually support the thing, you need to go here. And I do it myself as a music fan. I listen to an album first on Spotify, and then I go and buy it on record, or buy the tickets to the shows and stuff. And I think a lot of people do that, and I think there is a hill to die on when it comes to Spotify and streaming services, but to throw the baby out with the bathwater is a big step.
Yeah. And before I just didn't want to cross that line. And some other people talked to me and said, if you look at the amount of reach and how many more people, even if a small percentage of those people are true supporters that'll buy your stuff, you're still coming out because you're reaching people you would have never gotten to before. And that really seems to be the case. And you see when people start saying, well, you're getting paid 0.0007 per play, and that turns you off pretty quick. But if I just think about it like terrestrial radio used to be, and it's just a way to get your music heard, I can go to bed at night now and sleep with what I've done. So that's where.
Cool. Well, Go West is on streaming services now. You're coming over to the UK and Europe for 2024. Do you have any tour dates in America that you've got coming up imminently? This is going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
The ones I have are mostly those are unconfirmed dates, so I really can't talk about the ones that my agency's put together. And I don't have anything. A lot of the stuff's just still locally. I'm going to Fort Wayne, Indiana. If you go to the website, you can see where I'm going to be. And I'm still probably within I know I'm going way over in Virginia come summer. So there's still chances to catch me here locally. And what I'm seeing too, just more and more people are driving up from Atlanta or wherever to come and see the show, and it's great. So come and see us while you can. That's what I'll say to you.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. You definitely fucking deserve it.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm sure.
There we have it, folks. That's episode 63 of the Rogue Country podcast done and dusted. Thank you so much for listening, and make sure you check out John R. Miller and JP Harris on tour in March, Mike and the Moon Pies on tour in the beginning of April, and make sure you do not fucking miss Luke Hendrickson when he hits these shows at the end of April. All information is available on the Rogue Country page, and until next time, keep supporting the things you love and keep doing the things you love. Peace.